talked about the role of community. You mentioned that was the one part that you missed when you were putting this together. What is that part? What role does community play in the transformation of productivity, but also in being, and this integration that you're talking about? What role does community play in that? Do you feel comfortable with that now? You said you weren't comfortable with it before, but do you now?
I'm comfortable enough to discuss it in what I'm thinking right now. I don't know if I've mapped everything out. So when I first was building the monk manual, I didn't think that I had. It's almost like I didn't understand the function of community enough and how all the different elements worked within a monastic setting to be able to say, oh, this is how you port that over. I did try to gesture towards it by just having a prompt of how can I give today something along those lines as in the monk manual on a daily basis, because I do think there's a danger when we're thinking about productivity or even planning that it kind of becomes something where we look in versus out. So trying to anchor it in that. I am. Right now, I'm actually, like, if you were to ask, what is the question I'm living through right now? It is this question of how do you go and take maybe a community ideal and port it over, whether that's to families, whether that's to more of like a community group. I feel like that's part of my own journey right now to try and understand that. I do know some elements, right? Like one of the things that makes a monastic community work is the fact that people are, at least in abstraction, but also in reality, oriented towards the same values, right? On the highest level, they're oriented towards the same values. There's also something magical, I think, that happens because there is commitment, right? A lot of times in communities nowadays, there's not really a real sense of true commitment to either something bigger than themselves or to the group itself. So I think being with other people in that way, in a committed fashion, does something. But the reason I'm trying to really grapple with this and understand it is because I mean we hopped on before we got on our call today, we were talking about AI, right? And this isn't about AI per se, but I think that community is one of the most, I don't know, maybe like this is dramatic to say, but like bankrupt aspects of society. Like community is a real pain point for virtually everyone. Because I know a lot of people who are faithful Christians, but also not. And it's like across the board, right? People are feeling isolated. Across the board, people are feeling commoditized or whatever it is. I even think that part of the real thrust of kind of like I need to express myself is actually just this desperate desire for someone to actually see you. Right? For someone to actually not feel like a cog in some sort of marketing machine or whatever it is. So community feels like it's actually a societal problem, that potentially one of the greatest ones that we're facing. I think that when you look at monasticism, it's traditionally a giant source of innovation, education, healthcare, all these things that over time, I think the secular world has largely caught up to. I think that no one really has a great answer for the community piece. So I'm intrigued about it on that level. I'm also intrigued by it because I think with AI and changes that are going to happen, I think community is going to be more important. I'm not saying that in like an apocalyptic sense or anything like that, but I'm saying more so from a standpoint of it's like the more that our lives are driven by that which isn't human, I think the more we'll desire that which is human. And also, I personally really want to understand that. Like, I personally want to understand. So one of the premises behind productivity is that meaning comes from what you do. It's your action. Community mandates that it's also what you receive, and it's also what you're a part of. And that's something that's been opening up more for me. It naturally, because it has to, as I've been growing, it kind of has to move beyond me to something else. And so that's part of my own just general interest. So I don't actually have an answer to what it is. I'm actually certain that you have a better answer than I do.
Well, I think your answer is actually pretty good. I think you've hit the nail on the head. That's what we've noticed is that people are feeling much more isolated in than they've ever have before. That's why one of the things that we're most passionate about is kind of a relational revolution within the churches itself, because the churches have become more of an attract and see type of idea, operating in a cultural topography that has shifted. And we're
Mhm.
saying the culture has shifted now where belonging is so much more important for people. And even our brains are hardwired that way. We've talked a lot about neurotheology on this show. We are actually wired to belong to a group of people and to feel like we're a part of it. And you're right, people are feeling much more isolated than they ever have. I love what you said though about this productivity, where I'm announcing it to the world that I'm more than just a cog in the machine, that I'm
Mhm.
actually a part of it, that I can know and be known in the full expression of who I am.
Mhm.
And I think relationally we're missing that. But I also think in the way that I understand church and how I've experienced it, it's there. And I think it's one of the natural places that we have. I think in society, I think we try to manifest it and try to find it in a lot of different ways. We try to create what should be within the church. Now, I think it's largely I think the church is operating off of a model that is much more business related, and they're getting
Mhm.
business results, and it's not for the flourishing of humanity. It's for a very narrow individualistic understanding of what it means for salvation. But I think that they need to understand more broad, because it's not only when Jesus said that they might have life, they have a life to the full. And yes, it's talking about eternity, but there's the idea of living a better life even now to the world around me, that I'm transformed and that I have something to offer the world, and the world has something, and I mean the world, but the people around me, and that they have something to offer me as well. And I love how you said that it's opening up, and I think everyone's feeling that. And you said Christian and non-Christian. I think that's very true. And we've had a lot of conversations on this show because there's a thing right now called the great dechurching that's going on. 40 million people have stopped going to church in the last 25 years in the United States of America. The question is why? What is it? What's happened? And there's a lot of reasons why in the surveys and the data, and they actually think that the number's a lot bigger than 40 million. But one of the things is people feel like they move to a new city and they don't belong anymore. They don't know how to form relationships. And as our life continually becomes more online, it becomes more difficult to do, because now people are talking past one another. AI and technology is isolating it, where we're only hearing the algorithm, the voices of the algorithm is giving us, depending on what our media diet is, and then we become further isolated. So it becomes more imperative. I think you've actually hit it really well. Is we need to be meeting in person more fully. I think the church provides that personally. I just think people need to recover in what that looks like.